I've spoken before on this show how the proliferation of comic shops in the late 70s and early 80s led to a boom in self-published comics. This would include successful titles like Cerebus the Aardvark, Gru the Wanderer, Usagi Yojimbo, and the title that eventually became the flag bearer for all of these books, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
The bubble would pretty much pop around 1988 as the market was soon flooded with various Ninja Turtles knockoffs. You had books like Adolescent Radioactive Black Belt Hamsters, Naive Interdimensional Commando Koalas, and Preteen Dirty Jean Kung Fu Kangaroos. Those were the good ones.
Now, the idea of self-publishing didn't completely go away, just that it kind of took a bit of a hit. Case in point, in 1991, an up-and-coming cartoonist named Jeff Smith hit on the idea of using comics to tell his grand narrative and then maybe transfer it over into a multimedia franchise.
Smith set out to tell the tale of a dark fantasy peppered with the types of humor found in the likes of Looney Tunes and Carl Barks' Uncle Scrooge comics. Smith designed his three principal characters with heads shaped like old telephone headset receivers.
Ask your parents, kids. Or possibly your grandparents at this point.
The phone receiver people became the principal character of Phone Bone as well as his cousins, Smiley and Phony Bone. The trio had been run out of their hometown of Boneville when wound up charging headfirst into a civilization, fighting a seemingly never-ending battle against an incursion from the forces of darkness.
Over the next 13 years, Jeff Smith's Bone will become one of the most heralded self-published comics ever, winning numerous awards, attracting attention from both Nickelodeon and Netflix for an animated series, and even receiving full-color reprints of its original collected editions from Scholastic Publishing. Today we're looking at the first volume of those full-color reprints. This is Bone Volume 1, Out of Boneville.
The three Bones have settled on a desert plateau. They've been run out of Boneville before, but never for 2 consecutive weeks. In fact, they're so far out of Boneville that they've apparently run completely off of Phone Bone's map. This further increases Phony Bone's stress levels as he's completely cut off from his mostly ill-gotten finances. Also, Smiley has drank all the water. On the plus side, Smiley has somehow turned up an additional map that shows of a civilization located just across a small mountain range. Before they can set out to what they believe to be Boneville, the group is soon accosted by a massive swarm of locusts. The trio try to leave the plateau, but are soon overwhelmed, with Phone Bone holding onto the map. Completely unmoored from his family, Phone Bone falls over a cliff and into a ravine. He manages to survive unharmed, but with no idea where Phony and Smiley are. Also, his constant calling out to his cousins has appeared to awaken something. Phone Bone manages to strike some good fortune as he crawls out of the ravine and soon finds himself near the mountain range depicted on the map. He also finds a trail of what appears to be cigar butts that once belonged to Smiley leading up the mountain range.
We'll get into exact details on what caused the Bones to be run out of Boneville to begin with. Just know for now that Phony Bone is a con man who constantly gets involved in get-rich-quick schemes, usually involving both nuclear waste and food for some reason. Smiley Bone is a merry prankster who often winds up foiling Phony's plans, and Phone Bone is the level-headed straight man of the trio.
Phone Bone spends the rest of the day scaling the mountains and following the trail of cigar butts, which he soon loses as the sun sets, so he collapses against a rock to catch some Z's. While he snoozes, 2 rat-like creatures come across Phone Bone. They seem to be looking for him, or should I say someone like them, as they mention a star on his chest, which usually means Phony Bone. However, before they can grab him, the creature that has been trailing Phone Bone out of the ravine scares them off. When Phone Bone provides a light for the creature's cigarette, he soon finds himself standing across from a large red dragon. Phone accepts the gratitude for the light and immediately runs off screaming over the mountains. When the sun rises, Phone Bone soon finds himself standing in a small valley. Once more, attempting to locate Phony and Smiley, Phone Bone happens across a pair of loquacious plant hoppers, the smaller of which, Ted, offers to take Phone to the village of Barrelhaven and introduce him to Thorn Harvestar. Thorn might be able to locate Phone's missing relatives. Also, Ted claims never to have heard of Boneville. Unfortunately, the two get split up when the rat creatures come out of the bushes and grab Phone Bone. He manages to break free, and it's then that winter hits in the valley. Literally.
The rat creatures refer to themselves as hairy men, but everyone just calls them rat creatures, so that's what we're going to refer to them as.
Phone Bone manages to scrape by through the winter, gaining aid from a mother possum and her 3 kids, and moving into a small cave. While babysitting the possum kids, Phone gets a little rambunctious and winds up chasing them out into the woods, where they run straight into the hands of the rat creatures. Phone manages to swipe the baby possums away and then feigns an injury so that they can run off and get some help. He then manages to lead the rat creatures over a waterfall, actually injuring his ankle in the process, and is once more saved by the dragon.
The dragon is simply known as the Great Red Dragon and is part of a dragon lineage that unfolds throughout the Bone series.
The dragon allows the rat creatures to flee, much to Phone Bone's chagrin. When his fire breathing is called into question, the dragon blasts Phone and points out that it just wasn't necessary. After all, you don't use dynamite to kill a few ants. It's then the possums arrive as the dragon leaves, and Phonebone's claims are dismissed as dragons aren't considered to be real. Phone storms off in a huff and happens across a young woman dipping her toes in a hot spring. She's welcoming and Phone is immediately love-struck. She introduces herself as Thorn Harvestar. It's the same person that Ted had mentioned before Winter attacked. She's also never heard of Boneville, but does offer to take Phone to Barrel Haven when the snow melts so maybe he can find Phony and Smiley.
Thorn fled to the valley with her grandma, known simply as Grandma Ben, after the rat creatures overran her homeland of Athia. Now I know there's a bit more to it than that, but that would spoil later stories, so I can't go in too deep.
At the Harvestar cottage, Phone and Thorn wait for Grandma Ben to return after running a few errands in Barrel Haven, namely preparing her racing cattle for the Big Valley race held every spring. The snow is finally melting, and the two have set about doing a few chores, with Phone once more trying to prove that the Great Red Dragon exists. Phonebone even shows Thorn the map he found, which sparks a distant memory inside her. Meanwhile, we somehow manage to finally catch up with Phonybone as he trudges through some marshlands. Soon he happens across the Great Red Dragon and Ted. When Phony mentions Phonebone, the insect sets out to take him to the Harvester cottage. Along the way, they just happen to bump into Grandma Ben, and it doesn't go too well at first. Still, Grandma Ben lets Phonybone ride one of the racing cows back to the cottage, where he is immediately flung all the way into the fireplace. This proves to be enough of a tipping point, as Phony now wants to leave despite Phonebone's pleas. A deal is arranged for the two to stay at the cottage and do odd jobs until the Barrel Haven Spring Festival and the cow race. Of course, Phony is terrible despite everything he does and just winds up causing more trouble. His complaints about his remaining finances being wrinkled seem to bring about an uneasy feeling in Grandma Ben. It's then that Phony's instincts perk up when he hears about the amount of gambling that's done on the Great Cow Race. So he decides to slip off to Barrel Haven unbeknownst to Phonebone, who's off with Thorn.
Okay, so basically what's happening here is that Phonebone and Thorn are off bathing in a stream. It's off panel, so you don't see anything, but I should point out that, at least according to a fan wiki, Thorn is supposed to be 17 years old at this point, so, yeah, this is getting a tiny bit awkward.
As he heads towards Barrel Haven, Phony unknowingly passes the two rat creatures who are being summoned to a meeting with the High Council. Apparently, the one with a star on his chest has been spotted in the area.
The ruler of the rat creatures is named King Doc, and he himself is an underling of an individual known as the Hooded One. I know there's more to this character, but I can't say that without spoiling major plot points again. Also, the Hooded One is itself an underling of an individual known as the Lord of Locusts, who rules over all of the dark forces in this world.
The rat creatures try to explain that the one they encountered didn't have the star on his chest, but they're still taking a task for not taking a hostage. However, they do point out that they know that he's at the Harvestar farm, so the Hooded One orders an attack before the dragon awakens. As the rat creatures begin gathering around the Harvestar cottage, Phonebone rouses Thorn out of bed. Grandma Ben is willing to hold them off while Thorn and Phone get away. Despite Thorn's pleas, the two run off into the forest. The only thing slowing them down is Thorn's burlap nightgown, which keeps conveniently ripping all the way.
Again, everyone, she's 17!
When apparently cornered, Thorn resorts to using Phone as a weapon. Soon, though, they come across a better defense in the form of the Great Red Dragon. A couple of rat creatures try to stand up, but they soon realize that their counterparts have all fled. Thorn is actually able to see the dragon and asks for a ride home. They arrive at the Harvestar cottage as the sun rises and the rat creatures go back into hiding. Grandma Ben is surprisingly upset by the dragon's appearance, as the two apparently have a long history, with the dragon referring to her as Rose. As the dragon politely excuses himself, Grandma Ben demands an explanation from Phonebone.
So what exactly happened to cause the Bones to get into this predicament? Well, Phonebone decided he should run for mayor of Boneville because he was rich and therefore felt best that he could run it. Insert joke here. Anyway, to announce his candidacy, he held a large free picnic event, complete with a giant balloon that was attached to the town founder and Bone ancestor, Johnson Bone. Unfortunately, the balloon was so large that it broke the statue's base and began floating towards the crowd, driving them into a nearby river. Speaking of Phony, let's see what he's been up to.
Phony actually made it to Barrel Haven as night started to fall. He went to a nearby tavern and ordered a beer from none other than Smiley Bone. The two shared a happy reunion and began downing drinks as Phony explained his plan to manipulate the cow race. The fun times come to an end when the bar's owner, Lucius Down, demands payment. When Phony hands over a few dollar bills, Lucius rips them up.
Yeah, Barrel Haven actually operates on the barter system, so when Lucius Down asked for 2 eggs to pay off all those beers, he really wanted 2 eggs. Thankfully, there's just no way they're going to play into that stupid myth about having to work off your debt by doing dishes at a restaurant.
Phony and Smiley Bone are forced to work off their debt by doing dishes.
Damn it!
That being said, Phony is still working on manipulating the cow race by hyping up a cow that's supposedly faster than Grandma Ben's. When Smiley steps out for a minute to see about ordering a cow suit, Phony receives a visit from the Hooded One. The Hooded One swears to kill Phonebone for waking the Great Red Dragon and will one day own Phony's soul. The Hooded One then vanishes from Phony's sight as Phone, Thorn, and Rose arrive in Barrelhaven to wait out the rest of further attacks. However, as the Bones are all happily reunited, the Hooded One looks on from the forest.
And that concludes our look at Bone Volume 1 out of Boneville. How was it? Well, on the plus side, there was some really good world building throughout all of this. It's not really dreary, it's well paced, there's a lot of action scenes, but the characters all seem very grounded, very familiar, very natural, and there's a lot of good humor peppered throughout all of this, most of it at Phony's expense. All of this is coupled with some really nice artwork, with one notable exception, and that leads into the downside. And it's what I mentioned before. Yeah, Thorn is supposedly 17, and yet she's constantly being shown in various states of undress throughout this. Again, Bone has always been marketed to me as a all-ages book, and like I said, you have a 17-year-old girl who's kind of exposing herself a lot of the time. I mean, except the one scene is the one scene where she's bathing is off panel, but still, like the nightgown scene in particular, just really feels forced and didn't need to be in there, I think. I mean, running through the forest is fine, but the nightgown tearing or something, like, this is a world where there's kind of modern and old world sensibilities blended together, like Moby Dick, comic books. I think phones also exist in this world, but still, you know, like, normal pajamas don't work. She has to wear this burlap sack that conveniently rips all the time. But that's a really, really minor gripe. Overall, this is really enjoyable, and I don't see any problem really giving this to anyone and recommending it. So, yeah, I'm going to give Bone Volume 1 out of Boneville an A. And with that, let's see what we're doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Remember, you can help support my channel at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions. There, you can request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember, like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.